Greetings and welcome to Boise, the city of trees. We're delighted to have this opportunity to introduce you to our beautiful city. Today you will see how Boise is growing, but we're pleased that many beautiful structures still remain to help tell the history of Boise and Idaho. First, some basic information. The city center is on a one-way grid. There is metered on-street parking as well as parking lots and garages. We've made every effort to time our commentary, but of course we have no control over traffic flow. By the way, we're friendly folks, so don't hesitate to ask directions or questions. Our tour begins at the state capitol, which faces on Jefferson Street on the south. Behind on the north is State Street. On the east is 6th and on the west 8th. The tour also ends at the capitol. Now to set the stage. Native Americans called this the Peace Valley. When the tribes gathered here to trade, all differences were put aside. Those who visited the area included Shoshone, Bannock, Paiute, and Nez Perce. Then, in the 1700s, came French trappers, who gave Boise its name, Le Bois, the woods. In 1805, Lewis and Clark explored much of the West, keeping detailed journals. Expertly guided by a Shoshone woman named Sacagawea, they eventually reached the Pacific, removing many of the mysteries surrounding this vast, unknown area. As a result of their explorations, overcrowding and epidemics in the East, and discovery of gold in California, the huge westward movement began. The Oregon Trail and several alternates and cutoffs passed through Idaho. Having experienced a truly hazardous journey across mountains and rivers, with death, disease, and hardship their constant companions, travelers usually reached the desert of southern Idaho in the heat of summer. Imagine their relief when they reached this valley and saw a meandering river with cottonwood trees lining its banks. Few remained, however, continuing on toward their intended destination, Oregon. The discovery of gold in the 1860s first lured miners back to Idaho from California, and Boise sprang up as a supply center for those miners, travelers on the Oregon Trail, and the new Fort Boise. Idaho is really the only state settled from west to east. The Capitol building is modeled after our national capitol. Built of locally quarried sandstone, the center section was erected between 1904 and 1912. The east and west wings were added in 1919 and 1920, and the total cost of the building was about $2 million. What makes this capitol unique, unlike any other in the 50 states, it is the only one geothermally heated. Also unique, we have the only flag of the 50 states designed by a woman. Her name was Emma Green. Begin your tour on the ground or first floor. Enter from any of the 4 sides of the building. Inside are both stairs and elevators, restrooms, snack bar, and gift shop. At the visitor's desk, please sign the guest register and pick up a free self-guided tour of the building and grounds. Walk to the center and look up at the inside of the dome where you will see 43 stars. Idaho was the 43rd state admitted to the Union. The larger stars represent the original 13 colonies. Following the Capitol guidebook, you will find exhibits that will tell you all about our state, its industries, forests, recreation, people, and history. Look for the gilded statue of George Washington and some unusual textured murals. From the second floor, you can view the length of Capitol Boulevard with the beautiful Spanish-style Union Pacific Depot at its end. Visit the chambers of the House and Senate located on the 3rd floor, or overlook them from the balconies on the 4th. Our legislature meets annually from January to April. Time permitting, stroll the Capitol grounds. Our Capitol gardeners have received many national awards. Allow 45 minutes to tour the Capitol and grounds. Now turn off the tape and enjoy your visit. And don't forget your camera. Welcome back to Boise on Your Own. I hope you enjoyed your visit to our state capitol. Please listen to my instructions before continuing. Our tour departs from the front or Jefferson Street side of the Capitol. Jefferson is one way, east to west. From Jefferson, turn right on 8th, right on State, then left on 5th. Ready? Then let's continue. Across Jefferson from the Capitol is a statue of former Governor Frank Steunenberg, assassinated 4 years after he left office, chiefly as a result of mining disputes in northern Idaho. Turning right on 8th Street, the imposing building on the southeast corner is the old Federal Building, where the offices of our congressional representatives and the Bora Station Post Office are located. William Bora and Frank Church are two well-known former U.S. senators. The lone spire on the opposite corner once graced a soft drink bottling plant. As you move north on 8th Street, directly ahead is St. Michael's Episcopal Cathedral, built at the turn of the century with a Tiffany window on the west side. It wasn't complete until the corner tower was added 50 years later. Turning right on State Street, the red brick building next to St. Michael's is the 1892 Grand Army of the Republic building, a memorial to Civil War veterans, and next to it, the Hall of Mirrors, a favorite of photographers for its reflection of the Capitol. As you proceed east on State Street, you pass through the heart of our government center. The next turn will be a left on 5th, that's number 5 Street. At the southeast corner of 6th Street is the Ada County Courthouse. Erected in 1938 as a WPA project, it is constructed in Art Deco style of Indiana limestone. Inside are murals depicting local history. Old-timers remember the former courthouse with the jail on the first floor, providing ample opportunities for conversations between prisoners and passers-by. Located on the top floor, the barred windows of the new jail prohibited that. The bars remain, but prisoners are no longer housed here. As you turn left on 5th Street, the Idaho State Supreme Court building is on the southeast corner. This modern building, built in 1970 at a cost of nearly $2 million, is of white travertine marble quarried near Idaho Falls. The Supreme Court presides in Boise 4 times a year. 8 sessions are held at various other locations throughout the state. So you see, circuit riding judges still exist in Idaho. Guided tours are available through the clerk's office. Proceeding north on 5th, our next point of interest will be Old Fort Boise, now a VA hospital. At the signal, continue across Fort Street and turn right at the second drive, just past the old guardhouse. We have not planned a stop at the fort, but rather a circular drive through it. Fort Boise was established in 1863 as the city was growing up along the Boise River. Though it was not a large post, soldiers and officers became an integral part of the community. Parties and friendly competitions provided entertainment for all. A private's pay was just under $15 a month in greenbacks, which gave him about $7 actual buying power. In 1912, Boise Barracks, as it was then known, was abandoned by the Army. It stood vacant for a time, was put into service by the government on occasion, and in 1938 was acquired by the Veterans Administration. Along the driveway, the beautiful expanse of lawn was once the well-used parade ground of Fort Boise. The newer buildings you see today were designed to blend architecturally with the originals. Follow the main drive as it wends its way through the fort. Notice the poignant sign, "The price of freedom is visible here." Behind the sign, Building 13, was the wood frame Fort Hospital built in 1886 and later covered with brick. As the drive curves right, directly ahead is the Veterans Home, with the statue of Abraham Lincoln originally presented by the Grand Army of the Republic to the Old Soldiers' Home. The drive then curves left, and on the left is the Quartermaster's Building, erected in 1864 of local sandstone blocks weighing up to 1,000 pounds. Mortar has replaced the adobe originally used between the blocks. Bear left up the small hill as you enter Officers Row. Along this beautiful tree-lined drive are the red brick buildings constructed for the officers and the commanding officer's home of sandstone, all built in 1864. The interior is now modernized. These original buildings are still utilized by the VA. In 1863, Major Pinckney Luganville was sent from the Washington Territory to select a location for a new fort. He selected a site upriver from the old Hudson's Bay Company Fort Boise, a fur trading post. He chose this spot because it was located at the intersection of the Oregon Trail with trails from the Owyhee and Boise Basin mines and had wood and stone for building, water and grass for grazing. The exteriors of most of these original buildings have changed little since they were built, and many are included in the National Register of Historic Places. Across from the parade grounds on the right is Building 34. Distinguished by the unusually large doors, it was the cavalry barn for the 9th U.S. Cavalry, and the oversized doors allowed passage of the 78 horses stabled here without requiring riders to dismount. Your next 3 turns will be to the left. Left on Fort, left on State, then left on Warm Springs. Now, returning to the 20th century, the large white building on the right is the new Federal Building, built in 1965 and housing the FBI, Internal Revenue Service, federal courts, and other government offices. As you turn left on Fort, the tiny cabin on your left was built by John O'Farrell, an early settler, for his 17-year-old bride. Moved here from its original site nearby, the O'Farrell cabin also served as a schoolhouse and a church. Prior to the opening of sawmills and a brick kiln, the settlement was a conglomeration of log cabins, rough-sawn board buildings, and tents, a real frontier outpost with stagecoaches, freight wagons, men on horseback, and pedestrians, all vying for space on the dusty streets. Some of the most thriving businesses were the saloons, at one time over 30 of them, and more than 20 on Main Street alone. Many of the patrons were miners, and ownership of a saloon once changed hands for the price of a teacup of gold dust. At the signal, turn left on State, which becomes Avenue B, then left on Warm Springs. On the left is the Idaho Elks Rehabilitation Hospital. Built in the 1940s to care for Idaho's polio victims, it now offers one of the nation's most complete programs for treating the disabled. Behind were the polo grounds. Boise was once the polo capital of the Northwest. The domed structure is the Boise Little Theater, a 366-seat playhouse with 3 stages. On city-donated land, it is entirely self-supporting. As you travel on State Street, the large complex on the right is St. Luke's Medical Center. Established by the Episcopal Church in 1901 with only 10 beds, it specializes in maternity and pediatric care, cardiac and cancer care. Mountain States Tumor Institute, or MISTY, is a regional cancer treatment center serving southwest Idaho, eastern Oregon, and northern Nevada. We're lucky to have 2 large hospitals. The other is St. Alphonsus on the western side of the city. Patients come from rural areas where facilities are limited for treatment at one of these 2 excellent hospitals. When you turn left on Warm Springs Avenue, you enter one of the most historic and beautiful areas of Boise, where most homes are geothermally heated. Shortly after entering Warm Springs, you will see Pioneer Cemetery on the left. Time permitting, park here and stroll through this historic cemetery. The headstones read like a who's who of the founding fathers of Boise and also point out the diverse ethnic backgrounds of the early settlers. Ground for this 5-acre cemetery was donated jointly by the Oddfellows and Masons in 1872. Prior to that time, the public burial grounds were located behind Fort Boise, adjacent to the military cemetery. If you want to visit Pioneer Cemetery, please turn the tape off now. Since Warm Springs is heavily traveled, we ask that you occasionally pull to the curb to avoid obstructing traffic and to fully enjoy the marvelous homes. Also, there are a few restricted parking areas you should note. Continue now on Warm Springs Avenue. The first address to look for is a large sandstone building on the left, number 740. Now a counseling center, it was originally an orphanage. Built in 1910 on land donated by Mrs. Cynthia Mann, it was a community project. Families and organizations contributed time, labor, money, and furnishings. The building was recently refurbished by the sale of part of the property. Our next recommended stop is on the southwest corner of Walnut Street, at or near number 1035 or number 1037. It becomes obvious traveling along this tree-lined street that despite the city's humble beginnings, numerous citizens of Boise became very prosperous in rather a short period of time. As diverse as their owners, the homes on this avenue represent a variety of architectural styles: English country manor, French chateau, Spanish mission, Georgian revival, and Victorian, just to name a few. One of the older homes, the Russell residence at number 1035, was built in 1869. George Russell founded the first electric streetcar company and was a cousin of famous Western artist Charles Russell. As you are stopped at Walnut Street, you will see a large red brick house on the southeast corner. You are now observing the largest and probably the best-known house on Warm Springs Avenue, the Moore Cunningham home. Built in 1891, it is the first residence in the country to be heated by natural hot water. This 3-story French chateau-style mansion has 14 rooms with woodwork of cherry, oak, and redwood. C.W. Moore established the Idaho First National Bank in 1867 and was also president of the Hot Water Company. He had the geothermal heating system installed to demonstrate its practicality. Mr. Moore's daughter, Laura, married the superintendent of the assay office, Mr. Cunningham, hence the name, the Moore Cunningham House. Descendants of the original family still occupy this gorgeous home, and, by the way, its original cost was $17,000. Now, continue east on Warm Springs. 2 homes of interest are in the next block. Number 1205 is Granite Hall. Though the granite was quarried locally, sandstone was easier to work with and more plentiful, and therefore more frequently used. Built for Roger Davidson, a Montana millionaire, it cost $15,000 and has 15 rooms. Number 1225, a Queen Anne-style home, was built in 1896 for Selden Kingsbury, Boise City attorney and later a judge. Your next stop will be near the corner of Marden Lane in the 1700 block. Beginning in the 1860s, Boise progressed from a little outpost to a sizable city. Immediately after Boise was selected as a military post in 1863, Thomas Davis and several others laid out a town site between the river and the location of the proposed fort. In 1864, thanks to some shrewd political maneuvering, the city managed to snatch the territorial capital from Lewiston. By that time, the population had topped the 1,000 mark. While miners dreamed of a huge strike, few actually made more than was required to continue their quest. Those who prospered were the merchants and bankers, the purveyors of goods and services needed by miners, travelers, and settlers alike. Their wealth allowed them to build many of the homes you see here today. Another of the oldest homes near Marden Lane is the dwelling at number 1705, the Maynard House. The original adobe farmhouse was built about 1879. It now serves as the kitchen for the 9 rooms built around it. While stopped at Marden Lane, a few words about 2 famous Boise landmarks, White City Park and the Natatorium. Both, unfortunately, no longer exist. White City Park was an amusement park that operated from 1907 until the early 1930s. The Natatorium was located behind the present school. Just beyond the school on the right is the trolley house, which marked the end of the line for the trolley cars that first began running in 1891. For a nickel, citizens of Boise could travel to either the park or natatorium, which was one of the largest plunges in the world. Capitalizing on their newly drilled hot water well, the Hot Water Company constructed a magnificent Moorish-style 4-story building, a real showplace famous throughout the Northwest. The focal point was a 61 by 122-foot heated swimming pool. At the deep end was a 40-foot lava rock fountain, also used as a diving platform. Patrons could rent a suit, a towel, and a private dressing room for 25 cents. Imagine that, round-trip transportation plus a nice relaxing swim, all for a grand total of 35 cents. Now those were the good old days. The building also housed a restaurant, music hall, and rooms for billiards, cards, reading, and smoking. A wooden floor was placed over the swimming pool for dances, including the governor's inaugural balls. The days of glory for the natatorium ended in 1934 when it was damaged beyond repair by a storm and had to be demolished. Please continue now on Warm Springs Avenue. Then turn left on Old Penitentiary Road. The area was not without con artists either. Bogus Basin, now a ski resort located above Boise, retains the name given to it when a scam took place selling mining claims that contained not the real thing, but iron pyrite, fool's gold. In addition to many of European descent, Idaho once had a large Chinese population. Many Basques from Spain also came to Idaho. Though most had no prior experience in sheep herding, this came to be almost exclusively their livelihood. Their music and dances, colorful dress, and unique language are an integral part of our history, and their descendants represent a considerable percentage of today's population. Along Old Penitentiary Road, above and on the right is a sandstone mesa. This is Table Rock, used by Native Americans as an observation point and, on occasion, by less than savory characters looking for a stagecoach to rob. Much of the sandstone in the buildings you see today was quarried in this area. Directly ahead is the old territorial prison. Begun in 1870, it was built to serve the needs of the growing territory. Virtually all the work done on building the prison was done by the convicts. Now that's adding insult to injury, having to cut and carry the stone, then build your own prison. If the walls could only talk, they would have some bizarre tales to tell, such as the fellow who attempted suicide just before his scheduled hanging, only to be patched up and then sent to the gallows, or Lyda Trueblood, Idaho's Lady Bluebeard, or the longest tenured prisoner, Harry Orchard, assassin of Governor Steunenberg, who spent 49 years here and died in 1954 at the ripe old age of 88. After several riots, the prison was closed in 1974. Listed on the National Historic Register, the admission charge covers a slideshow, exhibits, self-guided tour, electricity, and transportation museums. Adjacent to the penitentiary is the beautiful Botanic Garden, which also has a small admission charge. Also on the penitentiary grounds is the Mining and Geology Museum. Across from the prison is the Bishop's House. Originally the residence of the Episcopal Bishops of Boise, this elegant home was saved from demolition on St. Luke's Hospital property and relocated here. It is not open for tours but is rented for special occasions such as weddings and parties. Allow at least an hour and a half for a tour of the prison. If you are making a stop here, please turn the tape off now and turn it over to continue. I've always found a visit to the old territorial prison an interesting and sobering experience. To continue, return on Old Penitentiary Road, then turn right on Warm Springs and left on Walnut. On the right are the offices of the Idaho Department of Agriculture. This state entity provides services, conducts research, and maintains records on our large agricultural industry. In addition to potatoes, Idaho is a top producer of lentils, dried peas, mint, sugar beets, wheat and grains, and agricultural seed. Dairying and cheese, beef cattle, and wool are also major industries, as are wine, grapes, and fruits, mainly cherries, apples, peaches, and plums. Throughout southern Idaho are canals that transport irrigation water. In Boise, several attempts were made before they became reality, and they are the life's blood of the agricultural industry in this area. Transport is so much easier now than in the early days. Prior to the arrival of the railroad, goods were transported by horse-drawn freighters to and from the railroad terminus in Utah. It was a great disappointment when the Oregon Short Line finally arrived, but the tracks were built 15 miles south of town, spawning new cities to the south and west. Finally, in 1887, a branch line was built from Nampa to Boise, but not until 1925 did the main line reach the city. The Spanish-style depot was built that same year. Before turning left on Walnut, look for number 1420, then 1308, both on your right. Since the 1890s, the homes along Warm Springs have utilized geothermal heat. Originally, the water was transported in wooden pipes, but they have since been replaced with more modern ones. To forestall the possibility of overtaxing the well's capability, usage is carefully monitored and there is a waiting list to hook up to the system. Temperature of the water as it comes out of the ground is about 160 to 170 degrees. The house at 1420 first stood near St. Luke's Hospital and was moved to its present location in the late 1970s. A beautiful Queen Anne-style home built in 1896, it has been restored to its original elegance. The Georgian Revival home at 1308, with the stone hitching post still standing at the curb, is the 1906 Cox residence. Mr. Cox was a real estate developer. After turning left on Walnut Street, continue to the Morrison-Knudsen Nature Center at the end of Walnut Street. Boise's rapid growth can be attributed to being in the proverbial right place at the right time. Located between the rich gold fields to the north and south, on the Oregon Trail, and the site of a military post. By the 1870s, grand homes, churches, stores, and hotels were making their appearance, and the business district was rapidly expanding with elegant neighborhoods surrounding it. Behind the Moore Cunningham home, on the left on Walnut Street, is the Laura Moore Cunningham Arboretum. A gift to the city by the family, it is a nursery where trees and shrubs are grown for planting in Boise. Municipal Park, next on the left, was a favorite camping spot with the advent of automobile touring in the 1930s and 40s. Its many maple trees turn marvelous shades in the fall. Our beautiful parks are the crown jewels of the city. On the south side of the park, the brick building is the Department of Fish and Game. Fishing and hunting information and licenses are available here. Just past Fish and Game is a nature preserve, the Morrison-Knudsen Nature Center. Located on property donated by the Morrison-Knudsen Company, there is a modern interactive visitor center and a path through native vegetation along a wandering stream. This is a wonderful spot to stretch your legs, enjoy the butterfly garden, admire the trout, birdwatch, and just take in the beauty of nature. There is a small admission fee for the visitor center, but you may walk through the nature preserve at no charge. Allow an hour for a visit here, including the visitor center and walk. If you have decided to visit the nature center, please turn the tape off now. To return to the tour, exit the parking lot to the right. Turn left on Park Boulevard, then left on Broadway. As you travel in and around Boise, you will see the Greenbelt. Now stretching nearly 15 miles, it is a linear park along both sides of the Boise River and is part of the city park system. Much of the periphery is intentionally undeveloped, and its easy access provides a great place to walk or ride a bike and enjoy nature. There are restrooms and water fountains in the parks connected by the Greenbelt and benches for resting. From viewpoints along the way, you might see the tubers in the summer. A popular local pastime is floating down the Boise River in an inner tube. At the signal, turn left on Broadway, then right on University. On the right on Park Boulevard is world headquarters of Morrison-Knudsen Construction Company. Established in 1912, MK has constructed major works such as Hoover Dam and the Alaska Pipeline in all of the 50 states and many foreign countries. This complex was built beginning in 1970, but the property was purchased in 1918 because of its location on Cottonwood Creek, then used for watering the company's horses. On Broadway, just after crossing the river, you will see a small white chapel and Bronco Stadium on the right. Turn right on University. The tiny chapel, now known as Christ Chapel, was originally the Episcopal Church of Boise and was moved to its present site from downtown. Ladies of the congregation raised the $1,500 needed to build it in the 1860s. The bell was the very first in the area and still peals in a clear, beautiful tone, and the 1869 Mason and Hamlin organ is still in good working order. The first services were conducted in September 1866. No regular services are held now, but it is often used for weddings, holiday events, and other special occasions. At the T intersection at Lincoln, continue on University Drive by turning right. The next turn will be a right on Capitol. Formerly the site of the municipal airport, had you been here in earlier days, you might have seen Charles Lindbergh as he made a stop on his triumphal tour across the United States. And speaking of United, it was here that several small airlines got together and called themselves United Airlines. Boise State is a 110-acre campus on the south side of the Boise River and began as a private junior college sponsored by the Episcopal Church in 1932. First located downtown, it opened with 75 students and a faculty of 8. During the Great Depression, in 1934, the Episcopal Church was forced to withdraw its financial support, but thanks to the community, the small junior college managed to survive. In 1939, the state legislature passed an act creating tax-supported junior college districts. Then, in 1940, the municipal airport abandoned this site and the college moved here. The legislature approved expansion to a 4-year college in 1965, and in 1974, it was given university status. BSU has the largest enrollment in the state, over 15,000, and offers degrees from associate to doctorate level in a number of disciplines. The student body is comprised of many non-traditional students, and the university also offers off-campus classes at several sites. From University Drive, turn right on Capitol, then right on Battery Street. BSU has an excellent athletic department and takes great pride in its football, basketball, volleyball, and gymnastics teams. The university takes a lot of good-natured ribbing for the unusual bright blue turf in Bronco Stadium. On campus also are the Pavilion and Morrison Center, providing the community with 2 excellent venues for concerts, theatrical performances, ice shows, dance exhibitions, and other events. As you travel on Capitol Boulevard, on the right, the rounded red brick building is campus housing. The buff-colored brick building behind it is the Morrison Center, built in the shape of the state of Idaho. Cross the Oregon Trail Memorial Bridge and turn right on Battery Street into Julia Davis Park. Park in the free parking lot across from the Historical Museum. The premier park of Boise, there is a myriad of things to see and do in Julia Davis Park. Tom Davis was one of the founders of Boise. He was a confirmed bachelor until he met Julia McCrum and fell madly in love. After they married, Tom and Julia settled here on the Boise River, where they established a farm and large apple orchard. Julia was well known for her hospitality and often presented apples to travelers on the Oregon Trail. When Julia died, a heartbroken Thomas Davis donated a large part of his ranch to the city in the name of his beloved wife. The 2 buildings at the entrance to the park are the Boise Art Museum and the Idaho State Historical Museum. The Art Museum features a permanent collection in addition to changing exhibitions, and each September hosts an arts and crafts fair. There is an admission charge. Construction on the Historical Museum was interrupted by World War II. It was completed in 1950. Here is presented the story of Idaho, with exhibits, paintings, and photographs that give real insight into our past. The museum also plays host to traveling exhibits. A very popular event, Museum Comes to Life, takes place the last Saturday in September and features costume demonstrations of pioneer arts and skills, all pertaining to Idaho's history. Admission to the Historical Museum is free, but donations are much appreciated. Both museums have gift shops. Adjacent to the Historical Museum are surviving buildings from Boise's early days: 2 pioneer cabins, Mayor Logan's adobe house, and the Adelman House, typical of homes in Boise from about 1870 to the turn of the century. Enclosing these buildings is the cast iron fence from the old territorial capital. Next to the parking lot is the Rose Garden, a fragrant place to rest and relax. The first roses were planted here in 1932, and it now contains more than 1,000 rose varieties. Julia Davis Park has something for everyone. Zoo Boise, children's amusement park called the Fun Spot, a small lake with paddle boats for rent, tennis courts, horseshoe pits, and playground. There is a small footbridge that connects the park and BSU campus, a Spanish-style band shell, and near it a marker showing the approximate location of the Davis home. At 131 Myrtle Street, near the northeast corner of the park, is the Discovery Center, a hands-on science center designed for the young visitor. If you plan to spend some time here, please turn the tape off now. Our tour proceeds departing from the Capitol Boulevard exit. At the signal, turn right on Capitol, left on Front, then right on 13th. Now let's continue. As you exit across Capitol Boulevard is the main library. Located in a renovated warehouse, it provides many services to all ages and segments of the community. Boise's first library began in 1894 with a few rooms in the old City Hall. Between Myrtle and Front Street on the left is 8th Street Marketplace, where turn-of-the-century warehouses have been restored and now house shops, restaurants, and a movie theater. After turning left on Front Street, you will see the low gray building, which is the Boise Convention Center, opened in 1990, and the adjacent plaza called The Grove. There is a Visitors Bureau office in the Convention Center building. From Front Street, turn right on 13th. Boise's town site was laid out in 1863, and choice lots were given free of charge in order to encourage the establishment of businesses. By summer of 1864, Boise had a doctor, blacksmith, saddlery and stables, hardware store, markets, newspaper, sawmill, 3 hotels, and was served by the overland stage. Wagon trains arrived almost daily and camped out on the banks of the river. Since there was a scarcity of women around these parts, the eligible gents in town got themselves all slicked up to impress the ladies traveling with the wagon trains. Though in its infancy, Boise was not without entertainment. Dances, musicals, socials, and parades were a pleasant diversion, and in August of 1864, a traveling circus came to town. By 1865, Boise had both public and private schools, Wells Fargo office, drugstore, watchmaker, dry goods, and clothing stores. After the Civil War ended, the traffic on the Oregon Trail increased dramatically. Because transporting goods to the city was far from easy, prices reflected it. Fresh fruit, if it could be found, brought premium prices. One thing that appears to have been in ample supply was whiskey, at $6 a gallon. The Boise of today is very community-oriented. Local activities are heartily supported. We have live theaters, the Boise Philharmonic, Boise Opera, and in summer, the Shakespeare Festival, just to mention a few. The Boise River Festival is recognized as one of the top 100 festivals in the United States. Volunteerism is the rule rather than the exception, and calls for assistance are usually met with an enthusiastic response. After you have turned right on 13th Street, the next turn is a right on Main Street. As you travel east on Main, street numbers diminish from 13th down to 1st. Main Street will take you directly through the heart of the city and Old Boise. Since it is very compact with many interesting places and historic buildings in the area, I advise you to return and explore this district on foot. Walking tour maps are available from the Visitors Bureau. I'll give you an overview as you drive. At Main and 13th, the buff-colored building is the Idaho Power Building. Completed in 1991, it is constructed of composites to resemble sandstone. 9 stories high, it cost $18 million. Between 12th and 11th is the Owyhee Plaza Hotel, one of the first in Boise, but retaining little of its original design. At 10th Street is the turreted Idaho Hotel, one of the grand dames of Boise. Opened the first day of the new century, January 1st, 1901, it has housed some very famous guests, including Teddy Roosevelt, Clarence Darrow, Ethel Barrymore, and Sally Rand. Across Main is One Capitol Center, home of the Simplot Corporation, a large conglomerate. J.D. Simplot developed the process for dehydrating potatoes and onions. The company supplies most of McDonald's French fries. At 9th Street, The white glazed brick building was Alexander's menswear store, built in 1924, but still looking brand new. Moses Alexander was also mayor of Boise and the first Jewish governor in the United States. After crossing 9th, you will soon reach the main intersection of downtown, Capitol and Main. The dominant feature is the West 1 building at 19 stories. On the northwest corner is the Egyptian Theater, which opened in 1927. On the northeast corner, the Boise City Hall, Ada County Government Complex. The area between the city and county buildings was once known as Levi's Alley, the red light district. When you have crossed Capitol Boulevard, you are in Old Boise. On the right are buildings that formerly housed the Empire Theater, Masonic Hall, the telephone company, we had our first phone in 1883, and the newspaper office. At 6th Street, on the left, the prancing horse on the roof advertised a tent and awning business. On the right was the Turnverein Society, a German-American social and music society. At 5th Street is Boise's first apartment building. Now the Belgravia, it was originally the Dubois Apartments. Built in 1904, it has walls from 18 to 24 inches thick. From Main, your next turn will be a right on Broadway, then right on Front. Between 3rd and 2nd Streets on the left is the old assay office. Built in 1872 with walls 2 feet thick, it is located on property donated by Alexander Rossi, an early settler and first assayer. Its function was to evaluate gold and silver brought in by miners, purchase bullion or dust, melt and refine it into bars, then ship it to a mint for coinage. Deposits often amounted to well over $1 million a year. In the 1930s, the government closed this and other assay offices in the West. It also served as U.S. Forest Service headquarters, then was given over to the Idaho Historical Society. Turn right on Broadway, right on Front, then right on Capitol. We have nearly completed our tour, and we'll soon return to the state capitol. I sincerely hope you've enjoyed our tour, Boise on Your Own, and that I have whetted your appetite to see even more. This valley has been home to many different people of varied ethnic backgrounds, and all have contributed to the Boise you see today. We think this is one of the prettiest and most friendly cities anywhere. There are many things to do and places to explore. Hyde Park, a quaint little neighborhood just north of downtown, Old Boise, including the Basque Museum on Grove Street, excellent restaurants, pubs, and shops. In addition to the Western Idaho State Fair in August, there's usually something going on at the fairgrounds. Depending on the time of year, you may want to take in a Boise Hawks baseball game or the races at LeBois Park. Both are near the fairgrounds. To the south of the city is the World Center for Birds of Prey, an organization dedicated to the preservation of endangered raptors. If shopping is your thing, in addition to the many stores and shops downtown, there's the Boise Town Square Mall and the Boise Factory Outlet Mall, both easily accessed from Interstate 84. To the east is Lucky Peak Dam and Reservoir, an adjacent Discovery Park with a swimming beach and picnic area. About an hour's drive north of Boise is Idaho City, an old gold mining town, the town that wouldn't die. Also to the north on the shores of Payette Lake is McCall, a beautiful resort town just several hours' drive from Boise. To the east are the Hagerman Fossil Beds, Bruneau Dunes, Shoshone Falls, Craters of the Moon, and Sun Valley. In addition to sightseeing, we have fairs and festivals of all types. You might want to try whitewater rafting or float trips, hiking, horseback riding, skiing, fishing, hunting, or one of many other sports and recreational opportunities. There's always something to do in Idaho, no matter the time of year. Thanks very much for visiting us. We're delighted you came, and we invite you to return. When you get home, be sure and tell your friends what a great time you had in Boise and Idaho. Happy traveling.